This is a reading from the Gospel of John. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said unto them, I am going fishing. They said to him, We will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said unto them, Children, have you caught no fish? Have you no fish? Have you? They answered to him, No. He said to them, Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That the disciples whom Jesus loved said to Peter, It is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, Bring some of the fish that you have caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, Come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, Who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead.
All right. Thank you, Esteban. Thank you for that reading. May God bless the reading this day, as always. Well, it's the third Sunday in Easter. It's Easter season. It's not over in one Sunday, as you well know if you've been going here very long. So we're on the third Sunday, and I understand that Sean brought a great message last week, and I had a chance to visit with my parents. I will kind of give you a report on that in a minute. I wanted to take just a moment, though, here in the middle of life, in the middle of Easter, to say there's some things that go on here that slip past you, and I don't want you to miss this, okay? There are two classes on Sunday morning, and they're studying two different texts by two different authors. One is by Nadia Bolz-Weber, one is by Tony Jones. And then there's a Sunday night class, and we're studying some work from Marcus Borg, and who passed away, I think, a year ago or so, and John Dominic Crossan. My people, listen, if you were living 1,000 years ago, this would be the stuff that was banned. You'd be thrown in prison for reading this stuff. I'm very serious. And I will guarantee you there might be one other place in town that studies anything by any of these authors at any interval. But for you to have 3 opportunities in one day like that here, this is controversial, it's revolutionary, and it is just full of the gospel. I'm telling you. I don't want you to miss that. It may not be for everybody. I get that. There's some things you may not want to know, because after you know them, you can't unknow them, okay? But I'm telling you that you have an opportunity, and it's full of the life of Easter. It is the life of the body of Christ in the world. So don't miss that. It's a great thing. It's good to be together today. I've been gone for a week, and it was a fast trip. Too fast. I won't do that again. I really won't. But I did want to kind of give you a report and let you know that I found my father this week in good health, fair health anyway. He was doing pretty good, and I promised my dad, who will be 80 years old in September, that I'll be there on his birthday. And I promised him a year ago, when he nearly died, that I would not limit myself to just one trip a year, that even if I had to make quicker trips, that I would get home to see him. Promised my mother that too. She's 79. She'll be 80 soon. I found her in even better health. She got some Forrest Gump braces for her legs. I don't know how to explain this, but that's what she got. And it's working. She puts them on and she's like, run, Forrest, run. You can't stop her. And you know what happened? She started walking and getting around again, and all of a sudden she wasn't depressed anymore, and she was happy and making jokes and all kinds of stuff. I mean, Mama came back when they put the braces on. It was an amazing thing to see. So when I talked about that, I think about Esteban. He's going to be fitted this week. And by the end of the month, he'll have his first prosthetic, but it won't be his last one because his, what is it again? It's an RL? His residual limb. Isn't that offensive? The residue of what's left of his limb. I think stump's a better name, but you can call it what you want. But it's going to keep shrinking. So, in a number of months go by, they'll give him another prosthetic, and eventually he'll be fitted with his new foot that will be his forever because it can't decay. It'll be his forever. I guess it could rust or something, but
It's titanium.
It's titanium? Geez, man, what in the world will they think of next? This is the age of miracles, buddy. I'm telling you, a foot that won't rust. That's a treasure in heaven. Moth does not eat it and rust does not decay it, buddy. So here it is. If you're walking for Esteban and not walking for life, keep doing it. Keep making your little video shorts because we're just weeks away from Esteban joining us on that big walk, okay? And somebody in here ought to be applauding. Besides the little baby back there, somebody ought to be really happy about this right now. Thank you. In addition to what happened with my mom and dad, getting to see them and give you a report, I got to tell you the coolest story ever. Those of you who have seen me this week have already heard it. You're going to have to hear it again. Everybody else is going to hear the story now. But I have a 16-year-old grandson who I've been that once-a-year grandparent to, okay? And I don't really know him very well, and I've never had any real credibility in his eyes, and I can't blame him. I'm the once-a-year guy, okay? He didn't even call me granddad. He called me Doug, okay? And so we went to visit, and his mother called him into the room, said, you need to come in, you've got company. He walked in, he looked at John Evans, and he looked at me, and he said, which one's Doug? It was his way of poking a little fun at our hair and our beards. And so it was that the week went by, and I went over to see him the last night I was there, and he'll be 16 next month. I'm very grateful to his mother for giving birth to him on May the 5th because I have too many grandchildren to remember birthdays, but Cinco de Mayo is easy. So my first grandson was born on Cinco de Mayo. He doesn't know what that means, but I do, and it helps me remember his birthday. Do you know he'll be 16 next month? And so it is that the other grandfather, my competition in the world, right? The other grandpa, the year-round grandfather, the grandpa, he bought him a car. How am I going to compete with that? He bought him a car, but the Lord was good enough to me that I walked up. Then they're fixing to give him the car. I said, where's Caleb? His mama took him around the block. We're setting up this car. He's going to come home, and we're going to surprise him with his first car. And I'm like, and I get to be here. Isn't this cool? And so I stood and I waited, and he came home, and they made the presentation, and he was floored. Oh, wow, I got a car. And then the other grandparents left, and we went into the house, and he broke out his harmonicas, and he broke out a banjo. And I started showing him how to play Cripple Creek on the banjo. And I told him I don't really know how to do this, but I'll show you the best I can. And we worked on a few hammer-ons, and we just had the greatest time playing harmonica, playing banjo, playing guitar. And then when we left, it hit me. I almost missed it. He forgot about the car. I showed him 2 silly banjo licks, and he forgot about his first car. And I gained credibility in the eyes of my 16-year-old grandson on this trip. Isn't that something? I had 4 days to get it done. That's worth applauding. Yeah, he and I are going to be great friends, I keep telling him, someday, son, I'll retire and I'll move back to Tennessee where I can be near you. And he tells me, well, someday I'll get out of high school, join the Air Force, and it dawns on me he'll probably end up at About the time I get there, he'll get here. Yeah. And if y'all meet him, don't tell him anything that he shouldn't know. You hear me? Like that stuff we were talking about Sunday nights, all right? Just leave that alone. They don't read those authors in Tennessee. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Okay. No, I'm not. I want to give you another report, but this is kind of wrapped up in an Easter and a Pentecost project that Ronnie has brought up. But I want to tell you that we are staying in touch with Cheyenne's parents. That's my son Levi and his mother Dana. And Levi, we get to go see about once a month. I visited with him on the Saturday before Easter. He is in Snyder, Texas, in the Daniel unit, and he's got at least 10 or 11 more months before he can request parole again, so he's going to be there for a little while longer. But he's making progress. He's slowly growing up, and I guess it's a rough place to do it, but you're going to grow up somewhere, so we're staying in touch with Levi. And Dana continues to write us. Levi's been on restriction. I think it's taken him a little longer than her to figure out the rules. It always did. But Dana's not on restriction. I don't know what she's into, but she tells us in her letter she's a mechanic. She has a job. She's learning to work on cars. And I'm excited about that. Guardedly so, because I'm raising their child, and she's their daughter, but she's my little girl. And I'm very frightened of these two people because I'm very attached to my little girl. But nothing would lift my heart more than to see her have real parents, not grandparent parents. And so I'm stuck in that rock, in that hard place. I want to tell you what the kids are going through, though. This is not about me. It's about them. They are where, let's say, where Jesus is in the tomb. They're being baptized right now, only they're getting the real version. When I tell all the kids, I'm like Jesus in the tomb. I'll put you in the water, and 3 days later, I'm going to bring you out. They're getting the full 3-day version of this. They're dead right now. I mean to tell you, they're dead. Everything that's ever worked in their life is not working now. None of it. And they're asking all those same questions all over again. Who am I? How did I get here? What's next? And when they get out, that's when it'll count. It doesn't count right now. It's just stuff to think about. But when they get out, it'll count. And I'm going to tell you, when they get out, the first people that are going to be waiting for them is me and Mama. The second people that are going to be waiting for them are all the people that helped them get there. Okay? Unless we get in line ahead of them. Unless we get there ahead of them. Because the world is waiting to tell them you are who you thought you were when you went to jail. You believe this or not. But that's what the world's going to tell them. And they're going to fall if we're not careful and if they're not careful. So Ronnie has this burning desire. I don't even know if she knows why, and I don't even know why we would do it. But we did it during Lent. I think, didn't we? Wasn't it in Lent or sometime? Yeah, when we put the tables up here. Ronnie has cards and Ronnie has envelopes, and she's... we're going to set this up over the next week, but during Easter and even into Pentecost time, which is called normal time, we're going to do time with these kids. And I just want to encourage you to just write them, because my son tells me the greatest thing that happens to him in his day is mail. And he tells me all the time, put my address on Facebook, give my address to people. I want people to write. He told me and his mother this: if you don't write me, there are other people who will. And I will be better if I read your letters and not theirs. Do you get that? There are people that are recruiting him in jail right now. So it is that we're going to give you a chance to just occasionally. You don't have to do it every week or anything like that, but every once in a while, and you don't have to know these kids. Just write a note. We'll say things as the Easter season goes by, and we'll say things during Pentecost to prompt you, to help you do that. But I'm going to tell you, they're dead right now, but they're going to come back to life, and we can have a role in that right now. And it doesn't have to be huge. It's little. It's little. Little bitty Jesus things, like we like to call them, okay? So look for that coming. Also, another thing that's coming up, we'll be talking about it in our leadership meeting today. I think today is the meeting. Is that right, Mike? And so we'll be talking about camp. We're getting ready. The price of camp keeps going up. And so we're going to have to get ready as a church. We pay half of all our campers' fees if they register in time. And the youth will be doing fundraisers between now and the end of May to help pay for their half of their camp fees. And camp is one of the greatest things that we do for our kids here. At camp, they have some of the most real experiences with God, those close encounters, because it creates the environment for it. And so we're getting ready for that again, to see our kids go to camp and have these, what we're calling today in this sermon, Jesus sightings. Where have you seen Jesus? We read today in the text that the disciples saw him on the seashore, the third time he presented himself to them after his resurrection. Where have you seen Jesus? Where have you seen God at work in your life? You know, there are stories that have come out of our culture. I remember when I was a teenager, there was this one story that got told over and over about people picking up a hitchhiker. And the hitchhiker gets in the back seat of the car and he's in the rearview mirror 1 minute and then he's not in the rearview mirror the next. And it turns out that it was Jesus. But all they ever said, though, was, "The end is near," and then he's gone. And I'm like, well, that Jesus has a very negative message, but that's a Jesus sighting. People are saying, he was in my car, he said the end is near, and then he just disappeared. At 60 miles an hour, he just disappeared. So I don't know what near is, but those I heard of in the 70s, so it must be getting nearer anyway, because it's been a while. But such is the message. There are Jesus sightings that people like to post on the internet. Do you have the picture? Did I get Mickey Mouse? Surely you gave me his hands. Oh, there it is. This is one that came out of a storm. I think this was in Florida or somewhere. But I remember when this came out, it was very popular on the internet. And I don't know what those are. I don't know if that's photoshopped or if those are real mammatus clouds. But if you ask my mother, she's going to tell you those are the hands of God right there in those clouds. And that was exactly what was printed and the caption underneath, so she got that correct. But there's another Jesus sighting that people are saying there's all over the internet, the hands of God. I remember one year at camp, we talk about Jesus sightings and talk about camp. I was working a junior high camp, Cairo, one year, and we were down at Vespers, which is the area right down on the water. There's a cross up there and rocks for people to sit on, and it's a very serene place where we like to have morning and evening devotionals. And at this point in time, we were there at night. And it was just after dark. And we had a few little lights on. And we had this large group of junior high kids. And they're sitting kind of up on the bank. And we saw a boat coming across. Now, we're having our evening worship service. And this boat just keeps getting closer and closer. And then I finally figure out they're going to come right up here because they can't see all the kids. They can only see a light and 2 or 3 people. And they think we're fishing. So the boat pulls up and says, "Hey, y'all fishing?" And about that time, he saw all the kids in the cross, and all the guys in the boat looked very embarrassed. And one of the counselors was polite enough to say, "No, we're trying to have a worship service here." And so we shooed the boat off. And the next morning at breakfast, I said, "I think we gave the wrong answer. Scripturally, the gospel says we should have told them, why, yes, we are fishing. Why don't you come on up here and join us?" But that was a Jesus sighting, I think, in some ways. Philip Gulley tells a story about a Jesus sighting in his congregation in Indiana. In the book Front Porch Tales, he says that there was a fundraiser that the women did every year. Dallas, you'll appreciate this, where they made a great tapestry together. And then they sold that tapestry to raise money for different ministries. I think they put shoes on Indian kids on the reservation. And so one year they were working on the tapestry, and a woman came in to work alone, and she was drinking coffee, and she spilled a cup of coffee all over the tapestry. And she tried to clean it up before anyone found out about it, and she folded it, and she hid it away. And when they came back and unfolded it to work on it again, here was this giant caffeine stain, but it was in the shape of Jesus. And so someone said, oh my, it's a miracle. Christ has appeared in the tapestry. There's a Jesus sighting for you. And Philip says before they could rein this thing in, the Catholics down the road found out about it, and they had a line of cars coming from 3 counties to see Jesus in the tapestry. He says the whole thing got so out of hand, the media got involved, and finally one little lady had to very embarrassedly come forward and say, it was me, I spilled a cup of coffee on the tapestry, and then all of the hype just sort of died down. And Gully ends the chapter in a beautiful way when he says, I'm glad that it was Maxwell House and not Jesus. Because he said, as long as we had that, we sort of lost our connection to God working in our lives in the normal, the ordinary, and sometimes even the unusual ways. And so maybe it's better if our Jesus sightings are focused a little closer to where we live than in the great miracles that appear in tapestry or in the skies. There was a television series that I used to watch, can I say religiously in church? I used to watch religiously and with my old friend Royce Maynard. And it was called Joan of Arcadia. Did anyone else ever see Joan of Arcadia? And this was a normal young teenage girl in her community who keeps having these encounters with God, but the trick is God shows up as someone different every time. So the poor girl is asking total strangers who say things to her, is it you? Are you? Never mind, and talking aloud to herself. But God is always in a different form, in a different person, a different age, a different skin color. It kind of kept her on her toes, and I think Gully would like that better than God or Jesus in the Maxwell House tapestry, because we have to keep looking every day. Isn't it a good thing that you would have to ask every person you meet, are you God? Are you speaking to me? Because maybe God is speaking to us through not just particular people, but through every single person that we encounter in this world. What a great way to see God. Some of the mystics say if you can't see God in the people and the places where you think God is not, then you cannot see God anywhere at all. Nadia Bolz-Weber, Philip Gully, and Jimmy Dorsey are people who have written books about finding God and seeing Jesus in the ordinary and even in the unusual. Many of you are doing the study on the Nadia Bolz-Weber book right now, Finding God in All the Wrong People. Dorsey wrote a book about all of the people that he brought together with his homeless ministry in Waco, Texas, called Church Under the Bridge. And Bob Evans and I and his wife Marilyn went to that ministry with my son Levi, as a matter of fact. We drove from Fort Worth one weekend to Waco, and we attended church with the homeless folks under the bridge there on the overpass. And we got to meet some of the people that I read about in Dorsey's book, because he gave a chapter to each of these wonderful people that had in some way been God to him. And these are people who are mentally ill, people who are powerless, people who are homeless and down on their luck. These are not the successful people, the movers and the shakers. These are the people who you would avoid, who I might avoid. And yet he sees God in each of these encounters. You know, I think one of the things that we're hearing in all of these different Jesus sightings is this, that you need look no further than your own story. There are many Jesus sightings right here. And some of them are easy, like the nativity we built for the baby one year that was born on the run from the law, or praying with Esteban as he becomes fitted with a prosthetic. These are easy Jesus sightings, but there's everything that you could want or experience or imagine right here in this congregation. There are people who this day are celebrating victories, and there are people who are struggling, and there are people who are battling illness, and there are people who are concerned and worried for people that they love and care for, and there are people in here who are engaging in new life through social connections and through ministry outside this church. Every story you could be looking for is right here in this place. You really don't have to look into the clouds or into the tapestries to find God at work. Just look around you at your story here. That doesn't have too awful much to do with the text today, by the way. When I studied that, I found this, that we see Jesus here in John's Gospel, the last chapter of John's Gospel. We see Jesus on the seashore, and he gives this command, throw the net out on the other side of the boat because all the fish are over there and there's a great catch. And you know, it's right then that John says, it's the Lord. They don't know him until then. It's the Lord. So it's John who recognizes him, but then it's Peter who does something. It's Peter who takes action, who puts on a cloak and jumps in the water and swims ashore and says, I've come to see. And in Luke chapter 5, there is Jesus in Luke chapter 5 calling those disciples from the seashore and saying to them, throw your net on the other side. It's a familiar story. By the time it appears in the 21st chapter of John's Gospel, years and years after the first Gospel appears, it's a familiar story, but it's not the exact story. It's there simply to say they knew it was Jesus. Who else could say, throw the net on the other side and haul in all these fish? They knew it was Jesus. In the 24th chapter of Luke, they find the risen Jesus on the seashore, making breakfast, sharing with them fish and bread. And in the 21st chapter of John, it's the same two scenes reenacted. Just simply to say that they knew it was Jesus, even though it didn't look the same. And then the whole thing is about this. I stopped today at the 14th verse. But John tells you all of that to tell you this. And I'm going to read this to you. This is 15 through 19, the conclusion of this story. And like we did a few weeks ago for Maundy Thursday, I'm starting to really use this in my own reading, that when I hear Peter, I hear us. Not just this church, or not just the church, but humanity in general. Peter representing us. So I'm going to read this to you as though you are humanity. You are Simon Peter. And you will answer me when I read this to you, and trust me, you'll know how to answer. And so here the reading. When they'd finished this breakfast on the seashore, then Jesus said to you, do you love me more than these? And you replied, oh, that's pitiful. He said more than these, and you replied, boy, you better get a little more dramatic than that. There's a comparison going on here. Yeah, I sort of love you better than him. So a second time, Jesus says to you, do you love me? And your reply is, yes, Lord. And then he says to you a third time, do you love me? And you reply, yes, Lord. But the third time he says it, you feel what? A little shaken. Why is he asking three times? And then the 18th verse, very truly I tell you. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. And he said to them, tend my sheep. Tend my sheep. Care for one another. Jesus can be seen at work in so many places, and we look for it, and we should. There's a world full of people out there that Jesus is engaged with, and they're not looking for it. And to those of us who are, the command is this, and it's pretty simple. Take care of each other. Take care of others. Take care of each other. There's plenty of work to be done right here in the middle of your story, our story. May God's hand be on it. Pray with me.